Hi, folks. This is Mark by Mark A. Foster, Ph.D. for the Institute for Dialectical Metarealism. Let's get rolling. As you can see, my concussion wounds are healing, but I'm still having to mask them a bit on my face with some stage makeup. So I apologize for my continued appearance. The Band-Aid across my forehead, which probably can't see very well because of the cap, but it's there. The stage makeup is mostly under my eyes. If I did not have it on, you would see that below my eyes, it's all black and blue. So it is what it is. Um, Wanted to talk about how to respond to attacks by first worldists, first world socialists, first world communists, first world social democrats, whatever. I went on to the Blue Sky platform and I would recommend it. It's a nice platform. It's very similar to Twitter. You have a limited word count. So basically, you're sending these kinds of micro blogging messages. It's not as big as Twitter, obviously. Twitter has a much larger user base. I should say X, not Twitter. But still, it's very nice. It's, I would say, more attractive than X, but has the same basic function. But I went on to Blue Sky just for the heck of it, and I said, let me do a search under third worldism, not Maoism third worldism, just third worldism. Now, some of the references I found were to Maoism third worldism. And what I quickly realized is that even if people just mentioned third worldism, the majority of them were in fact referring to Maoism third worldism. And I will tell you this, I did not find one positive comment at all about third worldism or Maoism third worldism. The only things that I saw that were positive were my own postings, primarily the videos, the YouTube videos that I link on various platforms, including Blue Sky, X, and Facebook and LinkedIn. And so it was kind of discouraging. And what I realized as I was reading these postings is that most of these people changed that. All of these people have no idea what they're talking about. And I'm not saying that to be offensive. I'm saying that because they literally do not understand Maoism, third worldism. They seem to think it is something that it is not, that Maoist third worldists believe in something that we don't, whether it is a defensive reaction or simply another illustration of the horrendous division which exists in the far left, in the US and throughout the first world. I don't know. Maybe it is a combination. But what I wanted to do to start this out was to read you a paragraph I wrote yesterday after reading about 24 of those messages on Blue Sky. That was enough. Enough for anyone, I think, especially if you are a Maoist third worldist. And so let me go ahead and read those things to you, and uh, I will see if perhaps you have a similar reaction to them as I did. Maybe you will, maybe you won't, but we'll see. So go ahead and open up the appropriate place. There it is. You can see I had it highlighted, okay, but I took the highlighting off just so you could see it better. Take it off again. I will read it for you, and you can read along with me, and then we'll discuss it in a bit more depth. Depending upon one's overall attitude, for a Maoist third worldist, such as myself, scouring social media platforms can be either immensely entertaining or endlessly frustrating. I often vacillate between one emotion and the other. Why? Why do some people apparently believe that Maoist third worldists accept, pardon my reference to the pejorative, the insulting term, the myth of the noble savage? You can see here I have a link which goes directly from the book, and I will actually put that link right below the video so you can read the stuff there for yourself. It has the first recorded reference to the myth of the global savage, not by that name, but it talks about it nonetheless. So let me read that sentence again. Why do some people apparently believe that Maoist third worldists accept, pardon my reference to the pejorative, the myth of the noble savage? And if you don't know what that is, we'll talk about it. Bear in mind that I am not and could never refer to people in the third world or the fourth world as savages. I, presumably like you, do not practice telepathy, but that nonsensical myth might be in the minds of certain of our critics. It is clear that human beings outside the first world are not innately angelic. We are all just regular people, nothing more and nothing less. As I see it, the major complication is the dialectical absence of a sociological imagination, and we'll talk about that in a bit. A term coined by the late sociologist C. Wright Mills. He observed that too many of his students viewed the world only as particulars, like car parts, never as universals, like cars. Without a proper understanding of differential social structures, we are ill-fated to be psychologistic. I have always found psychology to be enjoyable, but discussions of dialectical potential transcend conversations on our human potentials. Okay, so let's start with a couple of basic things, like the myth of the noble savage. What is that? It is based on the idea that somehow people who live in primitive, undeveloped, I guess these days we would say non-Western parts of the world are somehow better, somehow more virtuous than we are. They are innately endowed with virtues that we do not possess. Why? Because we are too corrupted by material influences. And they, living in the jungles, living on farms, living in the prairies, are not subject to those same deleterious influences as I am. And as a result, they are noble, or more noble than me. That is basically the myth of the noble savage. Now, obviously, that is a ridiculous idea. As I say in this paragraph, all of us are human beings, nothing more and nothing less. So to assume that by definition, people in the third and fourth worlds are more noble than we are is absurd. And yet it appeared to me, as I was scanning those different postings on Blue Sky, that these people apparently believed that that's what I believe. If they do, all I can say is they're wrong. I thought about responding to them, but I thought, respond to who? There were dozens of postings like that. How would I know which posting would get the most views? The answer is I don't. So I did not respond. I think it is better if I address this matter as I am right now in my podcast, and hope that other people will see it and realize that this myth of the noble savage has nothing to do, to my understanding anyway, with Maoism, third worldism. No sociologist, nobody in my field would accept the legitimacy of that myth. It is nonsense. It is ridiculous. It makes no sense at all. And any clear thinking individual should immediately, without equivocation, reject it on its face for its complete stupidity and its failure to make sense out of the world in which we are now living. As somebody who has been to the third world, Africa, Mexico, as somebody who has visited fourth world Native American reservations in the US and fourth world First Nations reserves in Canada, I can tell you firsthand that the people I met there were no better or no worse than me. When I looked at them, I saw myself, and I hoped that when they looked at me, they saw themselves in me, because ultimately, we are all part of a single human spirit, a single spirit of faith. There is no real difference between us. All the differences that exist are caused by the capitalist world system. They are artificial. They are a result of imperialism, colonialism, and what Antonio Gramsci called cultural hegemony. That is the cause of these apparent differences. And yes, they are differences superficially, but not innately, not inherently. I and my third and fourth world sisters and brothers are a part of the same family. They are not better than me. And of course, I certainly am not better than them. But all too often, people in the first world have made the assumption that they were better. So this myth of the noble savage, I guess in a way, is a kind of reaction to that, kind of saying, well, no, this whole idea that we are better than they are is wrong. Actually, they are better than we are. What that does is it creates social distance. They both create social distance. If I say that I am better than thou, that creates social distance. If I am saying that thou art better than me, that creates social distance as well. So we need to eliminate social distance, not add more layers to it. And the myth of the noble savage does precisely that. It adds additional layers to the social distance, a term we commonly use in sociology, between the first world on the one hand and the third and fourth worlds on the other. And so the myth of the noble savage needs to be defeated in the same way as the myth of the superiority of the Westerner needs to be defeated. They are both horribly wrong. They are both misguided. They both create a kind of reification of personality, meaning it turns people into things. I, as Mark Foster, am not the first world. I, as Mark Foster, am not the capitalist world system. I am Mark Foster. If I meet somebody who is in the third world or the fourth world, that person is not the third or the fourth world. That person is that person, whatever that person's name happens to be. And that is all. So the key is tearing down barriers, not building new ones, which is exactly, again, what the myth of the noble savage, whether inadvertently or not, appears to want to do. Okay. Put my glasses on again so I can see this thing, so I can go back to what I was discussing. I referred to the sociological imagination, a term coined by C. Wright Mills. C. Wright Mills was a brilliant sociologist. Died young, I think at 45 years old. Died very young, but at that young of an age, he was already established as one of the preeminent sociologists in the United States. And all the books he wrote, including The Sociological Imagination, which is what we will address now, are classics. So what did Mills mean by the sociological imagination? Well, what Mills said is something that almost any American sociologist can relate to. And that is that students, our students, because I'm retired now, but when I had students, finds it really easy to talk in psychological terms, but really difficult to think sociologically, to use a sociological imagination. So The example I would give to them is the one I put in that paragraph. The car parts and the car. What I said, imagine that you're driving down a rural highway. You pull off to the side of the road. And maybe I guess you're insane, but whatever. You think to yourself, I want to see what my car looks like when it is all disassembled. And so you proceed to take your car apart. And so after a few hours, well, with me, it would be after a few weeks, I think. I know nothing about cars. Your car is no longer a car. It is simply a pile of car parts. Eventually, a police officer or a sheriff or a deputy sheriff pulls over and says, "Is that your junk?" And I say, hypothetically, no, officer, that's not my junk. That's my car. And the sheriff, deputy, officer would likely respond, I assume, if that is your car, then please get into it right now and drive it away because your quote unquote car is parked on private property. The problem, the officer, the sheriff, the deputy was right. It is no longer a car. It is simply a collection of car parts. So at that point, I would pause and I would ask my students, what is missing? What is missing? Why is that pile of car parts not a car? What prevents it from being a car? Now, in our minds, we can all think, well, it doesn't look like a car or whatever, but I was looking for a more specific answer. And occasionally, not always, but occasionally, a student would give me the answer I was hoping for. What is missing is structure. That's right, structure. When a car is built, it is built according to a blueprint. The people in the factory know how to put the pieces together so that the car runs. If my car breaks down, if a piece of my car stops working, the brakes, the transmission, whatever, then I can bring it into a repair shop or my dealer, and they can replace the broken part with a new one. And then hopefully the car will run pretty much the way it ran before. So how does the dealership or the repair shop know what to do? They know what to do because they know the structure. They know the blueprint. They know how the car was originally designed. And so they can put that car part in the place where the broken car part was. In other words, they are able to restore the structure of the car. Likewise, I am a single person. I am not the first world. I am not the capitalist world system. I am just Mark Foster. But is the first world simply a combination of all first worlders? Is the capitalist world system simply a combination of all the people in the capitalist world system? No, no. Combinations mean nothing. If I go out onto the street and I bring together, maybe by paying them a few bucks and say, look, please come into a room. I want to do a study. And I get a bunch of fools who are willing to do that. They come into the room and they stand there and they say, okay, so you paid us the money. We are here. What do you want us to do? And I say, well, what I wanted you to do was to come into the room. That's it. The collection of those people in that room is by definition not a group. It is what we call in sociology a collectivity, a collection of people without a social structure. Groups have structure. Structure means proper arrangement. People know how to relate to each other based on their own statuses and roles and their knowledge of the statuses and roles of other people in the group. But a collectivity has none of those things. In fact, you may find people who speak entirely different languages, and there are no translators. And so, really, those people might as well just be people driving down the street in a bus, or riding in a plane, or riding in a train car. They're nothing more than accidental people. Or maybe if you selected them randomly, a random collection of people, but they are certainly not a group, meaning they have no structure. That is what is missing. And so that's what I mean when I say, without an understanding of differential social structures, we are ill-fated to be psychologistic. And I'm not using psychologistic as an insult. I'm using it as a reference to trying to reduce everything to psychology, to individuals. Americans are by and large psychologistic. Americans are good at explaining things psychologically. We like listening to psychologists. We don't like listening to sociologists. My students would often tell me, I can understand psychology. I can't understand sociology. And that is what C. Wright Mills was addressing when he talked about the sociological imagination. He was trying to get people to have a sense of social structure. Once you have that, you can place these differential social structures or different social structures into different categories of groups, different categories of societies. And so then you end up with the first world, the third world, and the fourth world. That is not the same thing as exploring this amorphous concept of human potential. Dialectical potential is different. Dialectical potential is asking, does a particular segment of society or of humanity have the potential to become emancipated, to stage revolutions that will lead to revolutionary socialism or communism? The answer, from a Maoist third worldist perspective, is that right now, by and large, the first world appears not to have that potential, that dialectical potential. I'm not talking about the human potential that you have or that I have. That is psychologistic. I'm talking about the dialectical potential of a category of humanity, people in multiple groups who share something in common, and that something is dialectical or revolutionary potential. So I think that is pretty much what I wanted to say. Pretty much. There are some other things I suppose I could add to it, but I think that would simply confuse matters and detract from the main point I was trying to get across. So, in summation, let me just state that when we are talking about something like Maoism, Third Worldism, we need to understand it not from the perspective of a first worldist, but from the perspective of a third worldist. If I want to understand first worldism, I will ask a first worldist and say, what do you believe? How do you understand the world? Because people know what they believe better than I do. People know what their religion is more than I do as a non-member of that religion. People who belong to a political party presumably know more about that party than I would as somebody who does not belong, well, to any political party, to be honest. So I think that that is where I will leave it. As I said, hopefully that has made some sense. Hopefully that clarifies my frustration in a sense and my entertainment in a sense as well, because it is somewhat humorous, although humorous in a kind of dark sort of way, because people need, right now, especially with the way the world is, and the world is not in very good shape right now, as I am sure you all know, people need to understand what Maoism, Third Worldism refers to, because we need Maoism, Third Worldism. And if people think that Maoism, Worldism has something to do with that silly idea, the myth of the noble savage, then they will automatically be turned off to it. I know I would as a sociologist. For the time being, this has been Mark by Mark A. Foster, Ph.D. We are booned. We are booned. We are booned. Have a pleasant day and an even better day tomorrow.